There we go. You consent now. Congratulations. You are going to be on live. Meaning for you live. And then once we get that, we will record the actual episode. But
You got
all right, we are good. We are live on YouTube now, my friend. So
hello, everybody.
yeah, well, we'll get the episodes here started shortly. But that means the live is working. I actually can see it on YouTube itself, so I can double check. I just double checked it, so I don't need to see that anymore.
We'll make sure that the audio is going through. I got a text.
It is. I had it actually going reverbing through my head, so I had to not talk while it happened. So it was all good. But when as long as you're ready, my friend, we can get this show on the road.
Give me 1 second here. Sorry, all on the tube.
Well, they get the early access. They see behind the scenes before we actually get to book the real thing.
I'm so sorry to everybody.
Yeah, really, I do apologize.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun for you.
This.
Like, there we go. This is where we get all our fun stuff beforehand and make sure the episode's ready to roll.
All right. That down. All right. Audio.
You ready, brother? All right, here we go.
Hit me with it.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of What's on Second, a true baseball podcast. We are live on the YouTube as well, so all of our friends on the YouTube, welcome to the live show. You get to see all of the action first. If you're listening to us on the airwaves afterwards, you get the second viewing of it in the more edited view. Congratulations on that. But it is Richie and Michael. We are back on the diamond again after a wild trade deadline. Michael, how you doing, buddy?
Doing, not in a bad way, but it's been an interesting week of baseball.
It has been a very interesting week of baseball, one we're going to dive deeply into because I feel like we have a lot of things to cover here. So, Michael, what's on the lineup card for us today, buddy?
So the lineup card, I think, has gone through for episode 114. It's gone through a few different changes. I know that whenever we came back from our little couple week break that we talked about doing or going back to the way that we used to structure the episodes, but it kind of got pushed off a little bit last week, and we said, we're going to go back to the high and low, and then finishing off with Bog Talk, and then a big little brouhaha in Cleveland happened, and it's kind of really thrown it for a loop. So for this edition of What's on Second, we're going to lead off with the Cleveland and Chicago Brawl. And it was a brawl. Yes, it was. There's been a few. Let's see. Give me 1 second here.
Well, it was definitely one of the few ones that we actually saw punches thrown, which is very rare in this day and age. But we actually saw a real punch thrown.
Yes,
and actually more than one.
That's the biggest thing. Is there's been some shoving and whatnot, but this is the first real big melee that's happened in a while. So we're going to go over that, just our thoughts on it and what have you, and then we're going to transition into a middle innings. I know we haven't had a ton of that recently. Segment of the episode where we're going to talk about the clubhouse chemistry and the overall culture right now in Cleveland, Chicago, and New York, as the Yankees have just been unrecognizable in the way that they've gone about some of their.
I'm going to sprinkle some others in there for you too, because there's definitely some others that I will sprinkle in there at the time. We don't have to mention them now, but yes, there's team. After the trade deadline, there's always this thing where either the chemistry is great and it skyrockets you upward, or the chemistry kind of goes through this period of getting to know each other, which happens most of the time, or it goes the complete wrong direction.
Exactly.
So,
I think two clubs so far have been going in the complete wrong direction. I think one of them is going to kind of go the other way, which is a good thing for me.
Okay.
But then we're going to final. See, this is what the YouTube crowd
This is what the YouTube gets. Hey, congratulations. You see what happens when we make mistakes. This is real life. We can't go back and edit this.
Those podcast listeners, yeah, you're not gonna know what's going on. That's all right. Usually we finish off all of our episodes with Bach Talk. We've actually decided to put that for next week. So next week's episode 115, is going to be an entire Bach Talk episode. This time we're going to finish with our final predictions of the year. So going into our leadoff topic here, we're just going to hop right into it. That was a crazy fight in Cleveland between Tim Anderson and, of all people on Cleveland's team, J-Ram, a guy who's never been ejected in his entire career. He's come out and said,
can't say that anymore.
Well, exactly. And it wasn't even because he argued with an ump. I mean, every time that he's gotten a bad call or something like that, you can see it on his face because he kind of shrugs a bit. Yes. Yeah. But then he walks off. But the day before the fight in the game, Tim Anderson I think he's a shortstop. Correct me if I'm wrong. Brian Rocchio, one of Cleveland's rookies, ran a second and he slid in head first. And Tim Anderson pushed him or pulled him off of the bag, and the umpire called him out. And the call stood. I don't remember if he was called out and the call stood upon review, or if it was the opposite way. And it was called safe, and then he was overturned and called out. I don't remember.
Really? I didn't know about that part. Okay.
Yeah. You should go look it up. Mm-hmm. Watchers, listeners, go see Anderson pull his hand off. It's clear as day. And for whatever reason, he was called out, and Tito lost his mind over it. Understandably so, because he got ejected that day. But I mean, I've never been able to stand Tim Anderson. I will admit he's a good player, but just his antics and the way he goes about the game rub me the wrong way. I'm a old school baseball fan enthusiast. I like the way that I think it should be played. Obviously, if you hit a 500-foot bomb, if you hit a big home run in a crucial moment, or if it's, after your guy got plunked or something like that, and you're making a statement, a lot of guys are going to pimp it. I understand. But we've all seen, Tim over pimp it. And I think at the end of the day, it's just the game changing, and it's these new kids coming up and this new era of baseball where they're just going to be more energetic and more, they're going to show emotion a lot more. And, sure. we got to all get used to it, and it's understandable. It's just the way it is. But the other day, the day of the fight, from what I was told, I didn't get to watch the whole game, but Tim Anderson was jawing at and going after Gabriel Arias, and enough to the point where one of the umpires went up to Tim and was like, "You need to cut it out now." And then I think Jose said that he went up to him and said, "If you're going to yell at anyone and give them crap, do it to the vets. Don't do it to the rookies." Which,
fair point.
Fair point. A little ticky-tacky, but fair
point. Ticky-tacky, but I'll allow it. But at least he stood up for his guy. So
exactly.
He's saying throw it at me, basically, is what he's saying. In the nicest way possible. Throw it at me.
Yeah. So then when Jose gets the RBI hit to drive in the first run, I mean, they were still down 4 at that point, but he dove in again, head first into second, and went between Tim's legs, which that happens. That happens probably way more often than you think.
It's hard to stop yourself with that momentum. If you've ever slid before, especially head first, unless you grab that bag perfectly, which they tell you not to do because you jam or break your fingers. They tell you to slide over top of it, catch it with your foot, because that's a little more durable than your fingers. So if you catch it with your foot, it's a little better. But he didn't hit Tim's leg. That's the biggest thing. He didn't spike him, and he didn't hit him in the leg. Those are the things.
He didn't get him in a sensitive area
either. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, so when I looked at it, it seemed like Tim kind of stood over top of him for a second too long. Because a lot of the times in that situation, the player will slide into second, or really whichever bag it is, and they'll hang on, whether it's feet first or head first. But the player, you'll see, because Anderson had the ball, will go down and tag the player. And even if he's safe, they keep their glove on the player. God forbid he comes off, just to make sure the umpire sees it.
It happened yesterday. It happened to J-Rod yesterday.
Exactly. So you usually see him do that, and Tim didn't. He just kept standing there. And so Jose, it seemed like he took a little bit of issue with that when he pointed up to him. And maybe, honestly, in a little bit of a way, Jose may have kind of instigated it, because he got up and he pointed at him. And I can see how that would upset Anderson. But Tim then starts pointing right back, getting closer into Jose's face. And that's when he said, okay, you want to go? And he dropped the glove. Tim's the one who put up the hands in the fighting position.
Yeah, that's where I was like, dude, where are we? Like, it's okay to have a disagreement. When you put the dukes up to actually start pretending to fight, I say pretending because most of the time that's what it is. But when you actually put up the dukes that says, let's go slug, that's where you got to, the umpire should have been faster in there too. They should have never let it get it. That ump that was at second was, I call a problem too. He did nothing to stop that. That could have easily been stopped. He should have been in between those two right there. Even if he took a hit, well, then you throw him out. Like, you're going to throw him out anyway. So you got to.
I actually personally don't have an issue with what the second base umpire did, because it looked like he tried to at first, and then whenever both of them, went and got into squared up at that point, that's when he went back. And a lot of what the social media posts and TikToks and reels and all that we're saying is, it's hilarious, because look at the second base up. He went from a baseball umpire to a referee, to see how it's going and to judge the fight. But Tim started swinging. So then what Jose has said the whole time is, I defended myself, and 100%. Tim put up the post first. Tim swung first. And then he completely
Jose dropped him first.
So not only did Tim Anderson get knocked out, he got the longest fine, because baseball did come down to it. At first, I kind of wondered what these suspensions were going to look like. However, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But Jose came around with a right hook, and he kind of got it with the palm part of it too, which is kind of why Anderson was a little shooketh afterwards. But he got him right in the side of the right of his right side of his face, and he went down. And then the cameras were showing him, the White Sox players picking him up, and he's all wobbly legged and completely off kilter. It's hilarious, because I don't like Tim Anderson. But then at some point Tito came over, and from what I understood, Francona started yelling at Tim Anderson, which is what Pedro Griffal
had a problem
with, which I get it. I get it from Tito's side. I get it from Pedro's side. I think both are right, both are wrong. But then those two then the manager started yelling at each other. And then Cleveland's third base coach, Mike Sarbaugh, love the guy, great baseball dude, came over, had his manager's back, started getting in the face of Pedro, which set off another melee. The entire time, like, think of Noah. And, he just came to Cleveland a week or two ago, and he's having to try and hold back Emmanuel Clase.
Who is not a small person, people. I want you to understand. Clase, while Batista is the mountain, and for obvious reasons is called the mountain because he's 6'7" and like 200 and like some odd pounds. Clase is what, 6'5", maybe 6'4" at the least, and he's at least like 190 to 200. He's not a small individual. You don't get to be a small individual when you throw 104. Okay, like when you can top out at over 100, you're not small. So when he is bearing down on you to try and catch him, I mean, Noah's not exactly a small dude either. So like,
but
a spade, but he just walked in the door. He's trying to catch Clase before he goes and throws hands.
Absolutely. So those are all the people that pretty much got suspended. that we knew something was coming from. So at some point, Tim came back out on the field to try and reinstigate something because, all these baseball players, and I'm going to say it as a loose, broad term because it's not just Tim Anderson. We've seen other players come back out on the field, after a scrum and whatnot. But Andrew Vaughn, literally, this is where it gets comical, though, is he picked him up like a freaking child and carried him back into the dugout. Yeah, pretty much. Like it would be one thing if he was having a good year. And this is probably one of the reasons why this probably blew up as big as it did, at least from Tim's side, is because he's struggling so much. And the White Sox have so enormously underperformed, even more so than Cleveland. So,
oh God, yes.
I think arguably more so because, they had the bigger talent, the bigger names, the more established talent, bigger payroll, and they've completely squandered it. So
sounds like another team I know, but we're not going there yet.
But yeah, so they had that fight. The both managers, understandably so, got ejected. The third base coach for the Guardians, Sarbaugh, got ejected. Clase did, as well as Tim Anderson and Jose Ramirez. Yep. Although it was funny because Jose went back to second after they quieted everything down, and then when he was ejected, he's just got some sort of sway to his walk when he's doing his thing. And he's doing that walking off the field, which I thought that was great. He didn't run off the field. He just took his time. And he got a standing ovation from the whole house.
Yeah.
As he did it. Although he's come out and apologized for it, supposedly. I just saw a Twitter post that he apologized for it and apparently has tried to reach out to Tim to apologize and whatnot. It's not verified yet. This is an actual interview, but in regards to suspensions, I thought this was going to be something quite a bit larger. So just a little bit ago, baseball came out with the suspensions for the players. Currently, Tim Anderson got a 6-game suspension. Jose got a 3-game suspension. Clase, Francona, Griffel, and Sarbaugh all got 1-game suspensions.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
With, Michael Kopech and Gabriel Arias getting undisclosed fines.
They were just they were chirping a lot, both him and Kopech. Kopech, I think, Kopech, I think, gave up one more hit and then he was taken out of the game. Not because of disciplinary reasons, but because they just pulled him. Arias and him were really chirping back and forth. So I think that's more than anything all they got. They were yelling at each other. Yeah. But it wasn't to the point of like anything crazy. The one thing I think that's interesting on this, because I'm reading this information now, the suspensions for Anderson and Ramirez both had been scheduled to become effective tonight. Both are actually appealing him, which is very interesting to me.
So that was one thing I wanted to bring up. I'm glad you did because I almost forgot to. The 1-game suspensions, that makes a ton of sense to just say, okay, it's 1 game. We're just going to, to serve them now. For Clase, it makes sense. He's a bullpen guy. It's an extra day off. For Sarbaugh and Francona and Griffall, it is what it is. It's going to be, a blip in the radar, and they're going to forget about it. For Jose, I'm actually a little bit surprised. Now, if a player gets suspended, it is totally within their rights to appeal it. So if it's a multi-game suspension, even if it's just 2 games, I tend to understand it because you can get it reduced. But with Jose's being only 3, I was a little shocked by that he was going to appeal it. I understand Tim's more because 6 games is a nice little chunk. But, if you can get it reduced by anything, then I understand why they're doing it.
I don't think it's so much to see it's reduced. So I take a different stance on this. Okay, it might be for Anderson to try and get reduced. So that I would definitely agree with on his side. For J-Ram, they're hosting Toronto right now. That's a big series against a big opponent, which has very big indications on the playoff race. Toronto for the wild card, more so than anything. And obviously the AL Central for the Guardians. I think that is why he's appealing. I think he's trying to push it off. I think as soon as his series gets done, and depending on who it is next, and I don't know, and I don't really need to know, but if it's a lesser opponent, let's be honest, he'll take his suspension. He'll take his 3 games and he'll eat it. Or maybe he'll get it suspended down to 2 and he'll eat it then. Anderson not taking his is to try and get that thing shortened, which is BS to me, because I honestly would say, no, you take all 6 games. Also, what do you have to lose in this situation? If you're him, it's nothing there. So I think it's very interesting to see that. But yeah, I think the J-Ram suspension is definitely to try. I think it's opponent based more than it is to actually get the thing dropped a little bit. I mean, if he does get it dropped, I'm sure he's going to take a reduced sentence. He's not an idiot. But I would say that. The other thing I would say about this is, you mentioned the struggles here, and I saw this and I thought you would get a little kick out of it because of your Anderson beef. Tim Anderson is the first MLB player to have as many home runs in a year as ejections and suspensions.
At that point, he's also got as many home runs as he does knockouts. So
there you go.
Not him knocking someone else
Absolutely. Out. That's the other one.
Oh man. Now, to your point, Cleveland tonight is starting a 4-game series against Toronto. This weekend they are coming down to us and playing Tampa Bay, and then next week they have a 2-game series against the Reds before Detroit comes into town, which is when I'm going to be back in Cleveland. So I will be going and seeing a Guardians game, which is exciting.
You're going back, huh? Oh, very nice. Very nice.
So yeah,
it'll be a Michael show on the road maybe next week.
Potentially. We'll see. But yeah, so they have a pretty good big time series coming up. So I can see your point. I think it's a good point. I think it's more so he's got the ability to play it and he doesn't need to start it right away. So if he can get it down a game, because I don't see it getting reduced 2 games to him only being suspended 1, because he actually swung.
He swung. Not only swung, he connected. Like
he connected and knocked him down.
It's not even like you can hide the fact that he swung. He swung and hit. Like he's like a good hitter. He hits.
Exactly. One of the last things I'll bring up before we kind of transition into the next segment here is, with the managers getting suspended and whatnot, I could see, this is me not trying to come off as bias in anything like that, but Pedro, whenever Sarbaugh went up towards him, looked like he was trying to reach for him. So that you're starting to get into the swinging territory.
Right.
Francona wasn't going after anyone, because he's old, but
extremely.
Yes. But when it comes to managers getting suspended and fined, do you think that they get it because it's more so it's that weird situation of, you are responsible for these guys. They just started a fight, so you're going to have some responsibility from that.
Sure.
And do you think that's why they get suspended? Maybe in this case, Tito?
Well, in this situation, Tito, yes. Pedro deserves his suspension because, like you said, he did reach out and try to grab at, and Sarbaugh deserves it because he is instigating
100%.
Getting in his face. They both deserve one. Tito gets it because of that. Yeah, it's kind of hard to pass anything else. It's more or less that if they can't find any more other people to really give it to, they have to give it to the manager. That's the person that is involved. That is who's supposed to control their house, control their house, hold them accountable, take a 1-game suspension. Is it the end of the world for these guys? No, I mean, no, not at all. And when we say suspension, what are the odds are? They're probably in the building. Like, it's not like other leagues where the suspension is don't show up to the building. This suspension is he's more than likely in the clubhouse sitting there. He's going to watch the game from the clubhouse. And if there's a decision that needs to be made that they need reassurance on, he will get on the phone and call it like a bullpen phone. It has happened before. So it's more or less that. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the situation. I would imagine Tito's in the in-house today. I would imagine Pedro's in-house wherever they are. Now I think they're in New York. So I would imagine he's at Yankee Stadium tonight. Like, they're suspended from that. The players cannot be seen, and usually they're told to stay out. So whether they sent Tim Anderson home. Well, no, obviously they didn't, because he's appealing his decision. So that could also be another thing on the appeal process, is wait till we get home so we can have you at home to serve the suspension. There's no reason to have you serve it on the road. It does us no good. You're going to sit in the hotel room. Like, what are we doing here? So yeah, no, there's a lot of back deals that happen in these suspensions that obviously we will never know, but yeah, I would imagine that more or less that's it. But yeah, it's usually because they hold them accountable. That's all it's for. It's hey, let's cut this crud out. Like, we don't want to see it becoming a pattern. Tim Anderson is a player that has a lot of good pieces to him. He needs to get his crap in order. He also needs to, honestly, nobody's going to like him while he plays in Chicago. He's a bit of a dirty player. I mean, he always has been. He's a punk.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I consider him the Walmart brand Jimmy Rollins. And I mean, maybe not even Walmart brand. That might be too nice. I might call him the Wish brand of Jimmy Rollins. Like, he's very good. Like, he's a very good player, but he's not a leader. He thinks he is. He's a lot of talk. That's a lot of garbage, and nobody backs him up. Do you see anybody in Chicago being really excited that Tim Anderson's on the field right now, or like backing their guy? No. So
I'm going to use what you just said as the segue into our middle innings segment of clubhouse chemistry and the lack thereof, or just what's going on with the culture. Put a pin in what you said with Chicago. I'll get Cleveland's out of the way. So Cleveland this year, it's kind of seemed a little wonky. in terms of, it's not that they don't have each other's back. They definitely do. I think you saw it the other night during that melee, and how they've come up with it, come around since. There was a report that after the game was over, Clase was sitting in his locker, and Josh Naylor came from the showers, with his towel around him and whatnot. And all he did was he just went up to Clase, pat him on the back. That was it. Didn't say a word. I got your back. And that's why I love Josh. And Josh is one of those people, though, that I'll admit that is a little over energetic sometimes with how, like, it was more so last year.
Oh, you're kidding.
Year,
Mr. Rockabye Baby is a little over energetic.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It was more so last year. He has not even resembled that amount of like over the top exuberance so far in 2023. And it's just showed he's grown. But no, when the trade deadline came about, you guys will have heard that on the last couple of episodes, and I think the last two videos that are now posted on YouTube. That I wasn't a fan of the Savali trade. I think most of the team,
we both didn't like the idea, really.
No.
We liked it for the Rays, but we didn't like it for Cleveland.
Yeah, and from what reporters have gathered, it's the same sentiment that the players are feeling, because now Jose and Ahmed Rosario were insanely close. And so Jose, a lot of people were worried about how Jose would react whenever they traded Rosario to the Dodgers, which of course Rosario is playing fantastic right now for him. He's had a couple of big hits, and all Cleveland fans are crying because this is how it goes with us. But everyone was worried how Jose would react to it. And because Jose is a legit, fantastic, grade A leader, he took it in stride. But the Savali trade was completely, it threw the clubhouse off, because from what a lot of players, the sentiment was that you've got our one consistently productive starter who right now is healthy, and you shipped him off. And it is almost word for word what I said in the last episode, which is, what's the direction of the team? Are we competing? Are we not? Are we pulling what the Mets are doing and saying this is a transition year? Or, what's going on? I still think at the end of the day, the Savali trade was good. And the more that I've thought about it, it actually is a really good idea that they traded him, because who's to say next year he would be this good? Not that he's pitching like an ace, but they capitalized on how well he was pitching now with some control and got a good prospect. Although it's the same with any prospect trade, you never know what the kid's going to develop into. But
yeah, but you guys have a good track record of developing good players, so
yeah,
that gives you the edge. So like,
yep,
I'll give it to you, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I just to give the layman's terms to this, because obviously you and I know this talking baseball over and over again, but to those that are not so baseball inclined, when you see a prospect trade like that, people are always like, how come you don't trade for draft picks? Well, they don't get to in the MLB. As Colin Cowherd figured out, because he's a dingwit clown who's like saying you should trade all these first round picks for Ohtani when he wasn't even on the market. But anyway, that's not how it works in baseball. So baseball, you trade prospects. What that means is if you're going to trade for prospects, you better be good at developing them. And there's a lot of teams that are not good at developing them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's teams that are. I mean, you look at Baltimore right now, they're developing them like crazy. Cleveland's developed great, like crazy. Arizona's developing like crazy, really well. Philadelphia has developed really well. LA has always been good at it. Tampa has always been good at it. You know, you wonder why these teams with smaller payrolls are able to compete. It's because they're good at this.
They have no choice.
If you're not going to throw the money, you got to be good at this.
Yep.
Or you're just going to stink. Yep. So a team like Cleveland doing this trade, it's a good move. Savali's done is a free agent after this year, is he not? Or is he got one more year?
He might have a year or two left.
Okay, he might have a year of control, but that's a very Rays like deal.
Yep.
Which is why they made it too. And it's two teams that like it's a very Rays Guardians deal. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's a very good deal for both fronts. It's frustrating though, because like you said, if I'm in the clubhouse, I'm saying the same thing. What the bleep are we doing here? Are we going for this or are we not? And it screws with the chemistry.
It does. And you saw it. I mean, it's not to take anything away from Framber Valdez. That no-hitter, he was on point. His pitches were filth. And he did it he had a Maddox no-hitter under 100 pitches. So
yeah, he did. That's right. I forgot.
He was a walk away. I think he threw the no-hitter on the minimum too. So had he not walked someone, he'd have had a perfect game.
Perfect game.
But you could just tell that the clubhouse was in a little bit of disarray. And Antonetti, and who's the club president, and then Mike Chernoff, who's the GM, flew down to Houston to meet with the team and say, hey, this is on us, and we're going to explain what we're doing in our frame of mind here. I don't think this is a shattering move that they did. I'm not worried in the long term for how Cleveland's going to do. And I think part of it is because those two flew down immediately and went and talked to the guys and explained themselves. So I think that helped. But Tito was even saying himself, he said, I don't understand it, but I'm going to do what I got to do. And I'm going to try and keep this clubhouse together, which I'm sorry. Tito's the one guy right now in baseball that I would want in the clubhouse to be like, hey, this thing happens. We're going to be fine. We're going to make it. And we're going to go from here.
Yeah.
However, what were we going to say?
No, go ahead. Finish your thought. And then I will respond.
I was moving on to the next team.
Oh, so before you do that, sorry.
No, you're good.
Here's what I will say though on this, and just understanding this and what I've seen. And this is from an outside perspective to kind of gauge this a little differently. Cause we love Michael. He loves his Guardians. He's going to talk about them, but I'm going to come at it from a different angle because I appreciate that team, but I also have no undying love. So I will call BS when I call BS. What I will say is this: whether they meant to or not, they unofficially, in my opinion, punted this season. I think that they said it's over. We're punting this season. We're going to not rebuild because we don't need to. I mean, we need to have a better year. We had a bad year, but we're going to punt this year. The Twins have now won the AL Central is what I got out of this deal. And you want to know what's the sad part is? They won the AL Central not because they're better, because they did nothing, because they stayed pat. Well, the White Sox are an implosion. We all knew that. The Royals are rebuilding, had no chance. And the Guardians, the one team that had their chance, decided that this year was a punt year now. Well, congratulations to the Twins. You just won the AL Central, unless the Guardians all of a sudden flip the script and the Twins flip the other way. Again, very possible, but I'm just saying as a symbolic gesture, they punted the year. If I'm a Guardians fan, I'm a little frustrated by that. As I'm sure you are, and I can see it on your face that you are. It annoys me when you punt a season when you're this close, because that division's garbage. We've talked about it over and over again. Again, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just calling it as I see it.
Yeah.
That division's garbage. It should be between two teams, and the one team punted it. If I'm the Twins, I'm walking away with this going la, 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 and now I have all the momentum in my back pocket, and it's driving me forward. Well, the Guardians just felt like they took the kick in the teeth in the clubhouse. Why is Savali gone? What have we done in between? Rosario, fine. Really, that just moved out to give Arceus his room. I think that's less of a big issue. And we got a veteran leader in there and Noah Syndergaard to hopefully maybe we can turn around and fix. But in my eyes, I see that clubhouse as kind of felt like, oh, the team quit on us. So what do we have to do? Like, let's just go do our best, but I'm not worried about it. The other thing is this, with that brawl that happened, who has the most to lose on that brawl? The Guardians, unfortunately. Who did Tim Anderson target? J-Ram, the best player on their team. Did J-Ram do anything wrong? No, he should have defended himself. He should have done everything that he did, especially knock him out, because we all enjoyed that. But but you think about this, who hurts more from that? The White Sox don't care. They're trash. They have Luis Robert. They gave everything else away. And Tim Anderson, when Tim Anderson learns how to play again. Everything else is junk. So what do they care about making a scene and blowing up somebody's league? They're trying to be the thorn in the side for the rest of the division now, because they just want to cause mayhem and be a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
It killed the Guardians' momentum. They're now 4 games under 500. They lost a series against a very beatable team. And now they're going against teams that are much more difficult especially with AL East opponents coming in. It's going to be tough. I mean, as much as I wish I didn't have to say it, I think that the trade deadline hurt the Guardians a lot. I think that it was a sad move, because I like to see them do well. And I think that they have the talent to do better than they are.
Yeah.
But I know they've been hit by injuries. I know the whole Bieber saga this year, with it being his last year, has been an issue. It's been a distraction, whether they want to admit it or not. There's a lot of things in there that are a problem. And it's a shame to see it happen that way, because I think that team is really good. I have a feeling they rebound next year, pending that the Twins don't do anything absolutely crazy in the offseason. But so it's a shame to see it that way.
Before we move on to the last two teams of this middle segment and then finish off this episode with some predictions, a little more fun talk. I've got to turn it around somehow. I agree that I think that they did punt the season too. They're not going to admit it, and they shouldn't.
No,
I don't want a team to come out and be like, yeah, we're punting it, because you can still, in theory, they can still win the division. They're 4 games under 500. Sure. They're 4.5 back in the AL Central. Sure. Aaron Savali is not a make or break player. He's really good. That can help your team out, which is why it was important, in my opinion, that Cleveland should have kept him. But he is not going to be the make or break guy in it. The make or break is going to be McKenzie and Bieber coming back and being able to pitch effectively. Quantrill, who the heck knows? And
I wouldn't even. Quantrill better not see the rotation again.
That's what I'm saying.
He better go to. He better be the innings eater in the bullpen. Go sit back there, and if the game gets out of hand, you can come in and throw garbage innings. That is all I want to see you for.
Exactly. So,
he better be your Dylan Covey, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So that's why I understand why they traded him, because next year, I mean, they have one more year of control with Bieber. That's why. Oh,
okay.
Yeah, so they do have one more year.
Done after this year, maybe. Maybe I misread it. Okay,
he's got one more. You're good. So I could see them trading him though in the offseason, which I wouldn't entirely be upset about, because we have seen what Logan T. Allen, Gavin Williams, and Tanner Bybee can do. And at that point, you might as well throw Quantrill back into the rotation as the 4 or 5 guy. And then you have Peyton Battenfield who can come up and start for you. You can try and re-sign Noah Syndergaard again because he's only going to be, 30 years old? I think he's 29 right now at the start of next season. See if you can get Syndergaard back for another year. Throw him as your fourth.
He's a guy you guys can teach. I know it was the best thing to see him go there. I thought that was like the best move. Once I saw him pitch in Philly last year and he just looked lost, he's not bad. He can pitch one time through an order. So show him how to pitch with stuff. If anybody can do it, it's the Guardian staff.
He's come out and he's admitted, I don't have 100 anymore. He knows that he's got to rely on the other stuff. It's like you said, just being able to do it effectively.
Right.
And actually, in my opinion, I think you can go 1 or 2 or 3 times through an order like a normal starter would, because that first start he had against Houston was a good start. He exited because I think he twisted his ankle or something.
No, he got the ball beamed back at his leg.
Yeah. So they did it for a precautionary reason. Yeah, I totally get it. But I think he can go 2 or 3 times through an order. You don't need him to pitch a complete game by any means, but he can do it. What Cleveland needs to do is just figure out what they're going to do with Bieber. Either keep him in the offseason, ride it out, or trade him so you can get a good sized deal for him. And then you know what you're doing in the season, during the regular season in spring training, and your players too understand what's going on. So they're not like in the middle of the season, oh yeah, we're contending. Oh wait, you just traded our best pitcher away. Correct. Who just blinked, or he had a very good outing against the White Sox. So it was a weird time in Cleveland, still is, but I feel like at the end of the day they're going to be fine because they have still the entire core of their team together. They have Tito still. I think he's going to come back next year. I don't think he's retiring yet. I think Cleveland will be fine.
He's never going to retire. He's just going to keep going.
Honestly.
I mean, hey, look at Bochy. He retired and came back and looks like a hero.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on, the next team will be a quick one, and then we'll finish with the Yankees. Chicago just looks completely. They're kind of like what the Mets are, but the Mets aren't as aggressively lost as with what we saw in Chicago. I know I can see what you're kind of where your mind's going.
I have thoughts. Finish your thoughts. Go ahead.
I don't see the Mets and the White Sox being the same situation, but Chicago, someone put a comment while talking about this Brawl saying this is what happens when you give out huge guarantee contracts. They should be performance enhanced. To some degree, that's right. Chicago gave Tim Anderson a huge contract soon after he came up because he was the one good thing that they had at the time. And then they had their other prospects come up as well, Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert Jr. as some of them. Michael Kopech was supposed to be another, but he's been injury riddled. Yeah. However, this is one of those things that's kind of changing with baseball is these teams are giving these young kids massive deals. J-Rod at the moment is right there in that mix because he got that before his first rookie season was even done. However, I mean, he seems a little bit more humble than what TA seems. But
shocker.
I know. Tell me about it. So Chicago from what I've understood and from what I've seen a bunch of analysts talk about, Pedro has no handle on that clubhouse. Like you said earlier in the episode, it doesn't really seem like anyone really has each other's backs because whilst Elvis Andrews came out and to some degree publicly defended Tim Anderson, it almost seemed like a Timmy being Timmy sort of thing. Like, it's just Tim being Tim. Manny being Manny. Going on a throwback.
Yeah, there's a difference. Manny being Manny was a Hall of Famer. Tim Anderson is sure not yet.
Manny Ramirez isn't in the Hall of Fame. Probably won't get in.
I know. I'm saying he
was a fantastic player.
Yeah, he has the qualifications.
Needles and roids aside.
Yes, correct.
So Chicago looks lost. Pedro does not have a hold on the clubhouse. Honestly, a lot like New York and Buck. Buck does not have that clubhouse in Queens. So
No.
Chicago needs to get a guy like Tito. I don't know how fiery Rob is, but
The
someone
term is not at all, trust me.
not at
It
all.
drives some of the fans nuts.
But they need some veteran players that are going to hold these players accountable, and not only just like rookies. And Tim Anderson at this point, in a way, is a vet. He's not an old ailing vet, but he's that veteran status where someone like an Albert Pujols last year would go and be like, you need to get your act together. You should be one of the leaders of this team. So
correct.
They need a new manager. They probably need a new GM. Kenny Williams isn't going anywhere, I don't think. They need a new owner, probably. They need a
new team
overhaul.
Yeah, they're horrible.
Yeah.
Ever since the Ozzie Guillen days, they've tried to overhaul it and it hasn't worked. It's been awful. They have pieces. They have Robert. They have Anderson when he's not an idiot. They have they get guys like Benintendi. They have Kopech when he's not hurt. They used to have all those other pitchers, but they lost all those guys because they sold them all off. But I mean, that's the thing. Who's the captain of that ship right now? The answer is nobody. Like
probably Dylan Cease at this point.
Dylan Cease and maybe Robert, because Robert's kind of taken that mantle in a way. But that's it.
So going to the last team of this that I had to talk about, at least, the Yankees just look like as far away from the George Steinbrenner days. Like Hal has completely trashed that team. Sure, George wasn't around when they won it last. He had already passed away. But
I'm gonna hold on to. I'm gonna interrupt you for 1 second because I don't blame Hal. Because I don't blame Hal for the reason. Okay, I half blame Hal. Let me rephrase this. I have to rephrase this because it is his job in a way, but it's his fault for who he put there. It's Cashman's fault. It's Brian Cashman's fault. It's Cashman's fault, but Hal is the problem because he put Cashman in there and gave Cashman all the power. That's where I call him the problem. So go ahead.
Aaron Boone is completely lost too. So
he's awful.
He is great baseball player, great baseball mind, not a good manager. Horrible manager.
Horrid manager.
So Domingo Germán had.
Oh God! You're talking about the game where he came out of the bullpen.
Yes.
Right.
So Germán was supposed to pitch that day. Showed up to the clubhouse belligerently drunk. Got into an argument and a screaming match with Aaron Boone and some of the other teammates. Let's see. He flipped a couch, smashed a TV, and made jokes while teammate Ron Marinacchio packed his bags for AAA. Then the Yankees made him go to the sauna to be able to sweat out the alcohol before bringing him in from the bullpen later on. He has since checked himself into a rehab facility, which is one of the best case scenarios at this point. But he is he's in a rehab facility. He's also not going to pitch anymore for the Yankees this year. He's done. His 2023 is over. No matter what New York does, if they make it to the playoffs, which I don't think they're going to now, or anything, he is done for the year. Is he
on the exempt list now? Did they move him onto the exempt list? Yeah,
he's out. So they have that incident. And then they have this one, which is Anthony Rizzo. I didn't realize, but 2 months ago, there was a play in San Diego where whoever was pitching for the Yankees tried to pick off, I think it was Fernando Tatis. And Tatis is just not a dirty play by any means. It's just the way that it kind of played out. Tatis kind of hip checked Rizzo square in the head. And it looked gnarly. So before this accident, however you want to look at it, happened, Anthony Rizzo was playing, had 11 home runs, hit 304 with an OPS of 880. He
was hot.
Yeah. After this incident, one home run, was hitting 172 with an OPS of 496.
Yeah. He's fallen off a cliff for sure.
Yes. So he was forgetting things. He would forget how many outs there were. He had a concussion.
He had a
was
concussion.
concussed
Yeah,
and
no
playing
doubt.
through it. And they didn't, no one said anything about it. And he kept getting like, he would have one person tell him, you might want to get checked out. You might have a concussion. Then he'd have another person say, nah, you're probably fine. Another person say, I don't know. He had a bunch of different opinions coming back and forth, when at the end of the day, in theory, it should have been him, but it should have been the Yankees that put him through concussion protocol to make sure he had one or not, and then giving him the proper rest.
What a flipping joke.
Exactly. Anthony Rizzo said that he noticed he was more tired, but he attributed it to the grind of the season. Mentioned waking up feeling hungover and occasionally forgetting the number of outs. And then testing,
he was definitely concussed. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and his reaction time was slower as well. So the Yankee, like they look so bad. So while it might not entirely be Hal Steinbrenner's issue on the field, that sort of thing and how the team's being run as a whole does go back to the owner. Brian Cashman Cashman was the GM when they won, I think, at least their last World Series, if not before it as well. I don't know.
Only 09.
Okay.
Because that was like, before that was years before that they won. That was like that was the end of the Steinbrenner days, was when was before 09. Because that was like all, yeah. Because that was like back in the other times. Yeah. Okay. I forget who it was, but it wasn't Cashman.
Yeah. I know he was on the team in some.
Yeah, he was on it in some capacity, but yeah, he wasn't running it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So Cashman is a big issue as to why, their player personnel has been just thrown to shreds. And then, like we just said earlier, Aaron Boone has just been an absolute, honestly, kind of joke. He has not looked good. His managerial decisions have been awful. John Boy interviewed him, put him through.
I was going to ask if you saw the John Boy interview.
Yes, where he said
it was telling.
Since what was it, 2019, he's had like 20 different starting left fielders, some like astronomical amount of people, like different guys. Yes. So they said, why don't you just find one guy and write him, throw him out there and get him going instead of constantly switch. Like, I almost want to look at Aaron Judge and be like, I get that you wanted to be the next captain of the Yankees, but
you could have been on a playoff team right now if you signed with the Giants.
With the Padres. I mean,
I don't know if he wanted to go to the Padres. There sounds like there's more to meet the eye there too.
Yeah, but I mean, anywhere would have been better than the Yankees. I mean, in my opinion, I know how much you don't like the Mets, but the White Sox and the Yankees are two of the worst run teams right now because of how things have been imploding on it.
There's absolutely zero doubt there.
The Mets have been a joke, but in a way, what Steve Cohen has done with getting those prospects from those trades, it's going to hurt them in the wallet. Obviously, he's a billionaire. It doesn't matter to him. But they got some good prospects back in return.
Well, right. So, he did what he had to do, and he admitted that he screwed up, and he immediately tried to fix it. I give him credit for that. I mean, I like the guy. But since we're going to segue to him briefly, that's the one that I want to talk about is the Mets as well. We're going to quickly to finish off on the Yankees. You're absolutely right. They run horribly. It's a joke. They need a manager in there that actually runs the organization. They do not need Aaron Boone. He needs to be gone by like tomorrow. He needed to be gone yesterday. If you were actually to be laughing, who should be running the Mets is actually Yankees is Rob Thompson. He was their bench coach for all those years, and they never knew what they had. Instead, they brought in Aaron Boone. Alas, that is what it is. But the Mets, going back to this is the one that just drove me nuts. As I was like, and I sent this to you off air, and I apologize that I looked down at my phone on the people that are watching on the YouTube, but I have to read this. So when the David Robertson trade came out, Scherzer lost it. Now, Scherzer's crazy. We all know this. Michael makes it. He's a senile old man.
He's a senile old man.
And Michael loves this line. He's a senile old man. But so when this went down, I sent this to Michael and I said, take a look at this. So Scherzer said he reached out and he talked to Billy, as in, and I can't remember his last name now. The GM for the
Billy Epler.
Epler, thank you. Billy Epler for the Mets. He said, I talked to Billy and I was like, hey, what are we doing here? Like, I was like, okay, are we reloading for 24? He goes, no, we're not. Basically, our vision now is for 25, 26, 25 at the earliest, more like 26. We're going to make trades around that. I was like, so this team is going to be pursuing free agent is not going to be pursuing the free agents this offseason or assemble a team that can compete for a World Series next year. He said, no, we're going to be signing we're not going to be signing upper echelon guys. We're going to be signing smaller deals in free agency. I think that's so telling when, first of all, that the fact that he was that candid with Scherzer is amazing for one. I give him a lot of credit for that because most GMs would never be that candid.
Nope.
What I will say is this. It's embarrassing for the Mets that they went through this whole thing. You can see the effects that it has had. Steve Cohen's experiment has utterly failed. It is a failure. $500 million payroll, flush it down the toilet, has not even got a chance of competing for the playoffs this year. They have washed it. They said, forget it. This isn't a punt of a season. This is a throw it out of the, like in a dumpster season for them now.
Yeah.
It's crazy to see. You look at that team, though, when they play, they just don't care. They do not want to be there. They haven't wanted to be there for a while. You can tell. Lindor doesn't love it. Alonso's getting killed. Vogelbach looks like he can't hit anything anymore. And then they traded Pham and Canna, who were pretty good, but they're gone now. So now they're relying on the kids. I mean, Beatty's about the only consistent good thing. Him and Alvarez are about the only consistent good things they've had this year altogether. So the Mets, all in all, are a team that is just run horribly. And I think it's just a terribly awful way to do it. I think Steve Cohen now has to understand that Epler needs to run the team. You pay the paycheck. Now, Epler also has to start looking at this with a brain and stop saying I have Steve Cohen's endless pocketbook that I can sign whoever I want. What I mean by this is you can buy everyone. And I'm just going to be honest. Look at the Mets. Look at the Padres. They bought everyone. Every single person on those teams, minus the few, were bought.
Yeah.
They're not good enough. Their team clubhouse chemistry sucks. Nobody wants to be there with each other. I will rival that by saying it can be done by purchasing people, but also you have to have people come up in the organization. I'm not tooting my team's horn here. I'm literally looking at Philly because they are a classic example of this. And if you want to call a spade, go look at what just happened this past week with Trey Turner, with the standing ovations. I mean, something so minutely small as that is a big deal. People want to play in a team that they are appreciated in and that they feel like the guys have my back. It's the same thing in Cleveland. It's the same thing in Philly. Look at the other teams. Arizona, those guys love playing together. I think they made a mistake too in the deadline as well. I'm going to briefly touch on them. They should not have traded Chafin. That was their big mistake. All those guys, you've noticed they've been on a 6-game losing streak. Seawald coming in should have been a great addition. It's not a great addition now because he's replacing Chafin. Chafin was loved in that team, and you could tell those guys rallied around him. They loved that he was kind of that underdog closer.
Yeah.
And instead of letting that happen, they took him and they sold him off to Milwaukee, because it's the Brewers. And and now that's their benefit. And I mean, he knows how to acclimate right away, because the first line he said is they like beer here. I like beer. Let's go. This is my kind of place. I'm like, my guy, could you not have fit the bill better? I mean, gorgeous stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm going to mention one other team here, and then we can move on to the final segment here. And it's a team that's done really well. And I think it's a team that is the opposite of what we've been talking about this entire segment. And it's a team that needs to get recollection. And that is the other Chicago team, the Cubs. They did everything they should have. I know that drives you crazy because of 16, but like, I'm going to have you bury that one.
I agree. No. So I'll put a pin in what you're saying.
That's fine.
What New York did wrong is they got desperate, and it was desperate spending. So you can go and you can spend, like, Max looked great last year. This year it's been completely different because the clubhouse is completely different.
Correct.
I mean, you saw it unravel and start to at the end of last season, but the Mets were onto something, and then they got desperate and went out and spent the EGAD's money on guys that they didn't need to, when they should have, instead of spending $20 million on one guy, went out and spent maybe, hey, I'll give this veteran 10 million and this other vet 10, who they might not blow the opponent away, but they're going to get the job done. And in a more important aspect, they're going to hold this team together and make it accountable, everyone accountable on each other and themselves as individuals. So the Mets got desperate. Chicago got strategic. So Cody Bellinger, a quietly, in my opinion, because I don't know him that well, but a quietly good player in terms of just production, but also a clubhouse guy. And everyone else on that team, Dansby, I think Dansby is a little more kind of like surprisingly vocal, if I had to guess, but
he took on the role there. They knew he needed, knew he was going in there to be a leader, and he took that on. There's a difference there.
So the Cubs were strategic, the Mets were desperate.
Correct. I completely agree. I think the Cubs made great moves during the deadline. I think they told the team, they said to the team in the clubhouse, we're not selling. We're going to hold on to, we're not selling Bellinger. He's not going anywhere. We want him here. We're not getting rid of Stroman. We want him here. Oh, by the way, we're really serious about this. You want to know how serious we are? We're going to bring in Candelario, who was a Cub. We're bringing him back because he's had a huge year, and he's going to help elevate us. And by the way, we think you guys can actually do some stuff. Let's go see what you can do. And that clubhouse turned around and said, this front office has our back. This team is real. We know we've been underperforming, but boy, are we still here. We're right in the thick of this. We can turn this around. And boy, did they turn around, and they immediately backed it up. They went right out there, and they've proven that they could, that they made the front office back the right horse. Because guess what? They just took 2 of 3 from the Atlanta Braves, arguably, if not the best team in baseball. They've been on. They've raised themselves over 500. They are now sitting tied for the 3rd wild card spot. I think a game or 2 out of the Central. This team could easily go from being bottom feeder. I wouldn't even call them bottom feeder, but like mid bottom feeder. You can understand that, and elevated themselves on 1 or 2 moves. Cause I think they did a couple other things in trade deadline, but they were minor, all the way to not only winning a wild card slot. I think they will be in the playoffs. I think they will possibly win the NL Central. And I had them in my first prediction that they were going to be something to worry about. And everybody said, maybe not this year. And then I kind of watched the year go along, and I kind of agreed. And now all of a sudden, my thought on them is coming true. They've figured out how to play. That was what needed to trigger. And now I'd be terrified of Chicago.
So
they are a good team.
As we to put a cap on this mid segment, I still don't see the Cubs as a potential spoiler as a playoff team yet. That's not to say that I think they're going to miss it, or that they don't have a chance. They definitely do. They've proven my initial prediction wrong, by remaining in the thick of it. But they've shown, their front office has shown how to do it correctly. I think, Cleveland's had a hiccup and a bump in the road, but the front office did the right thing and immediately went down and explained themselves and said, this is what we're thinking. This is what's going on. This was the reason why we traded Ahmed. This is the reason why we traded Savali. And then we traded Josh Bell. So I think Chicago's on the right track, the Cubs. I think Cleveland helped get the ship going back the way it's supposed to be. I think that fight was not necessarily a on-purpose wake-up call, but but it's
a wake-up call.
It is. I mean, when I say it wasn't an on-purpose one, like it wasn't done specifically to have a fight and a brawl and all that. So
right.
But it's we're meant to be here. I don't think Cleveland makes playoffs this year now at this point in time.
No, I don't either anymore.
But next year, I mean, it's also, like I said, most of that roster is rookies and young and inexperienced. So even though they made the playoffs last year, they still had a lot of growing up to do this year. So next year, I still have high expectations for him. But to use that as a perfect segue, we'll get through this final segment real quick here. I'll go ahead and lead it off. It's our updated predictions, our final predictions. We did one of three of them, but it happens. So,
all right,
just as a rehash of our way too early predictions for 2023 from back on April 23rd. I said that Toronto and Atlanta would win their Eastern divisions. Cleveland and St. Louis would win their Centrals. Houston and San Diego would win their Wests, with the wild cards being Seattle, the Yankees, and the White Sox. And then in the NL side, the Mets, the Phillies, and the Dodgers, with the World Series being Houston versus Atlanta, and Atlanta winning. At this point in time, with how teams have played and the trade deadline, and as we're getting into August now, the meat and potatoes and the final grind and sprint of this season, I've had quite a few changes. So
you think?
A little bit. So I think that the Eastern teams are going to be Baltimore and Atlanta. Baltimore just looks so good right now with all that talent. They didn't do anything earth shattering at the trade deadline, but getting Jack Flaherty, sure, he wasn't.
That is earth shattering in my opinion. That was the best move they could have made.
It's the best move they could have made. He hasn't been as sharp this year that he has been in years prior, but going to a team that has so much energy and potential that Baltimore has shown and will have and for the next several years, I think it could reinvigorate him.
I agree.
For the Central, I have Minnesota winning it.
Yeah.
And I actually have Cincinnati winning it. I'd love that team.
Ooh, interesting.
With all of their talent. They're just showing that I think they pulled off a little bit as of recent, but they haven't, they have been rising all throughout the year. So from what I've seen, I really like what they're showing. And then for the Western teams, I have the Rangers winning and the Dodgers, with my wild cards being in no particular order: Tampa Bay, Houston, and Anaheim, because I liked what Anaheim did. They went out and got Giolito. The offensive moves, whilst not earth-shattering, still, I think, productive enough to potentially push them into that, probably the third wild card spot, because they're not better than Houston and Tampa Bay. And then the National League, I have in no particular order: Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and Arizona, with a World Series matchup of the Rays and the Braves, and the Braves still winning it all. So before you hit us with your updated predictions, I'll give a quick recap of yours.
Yeah, please recap me, because I know that some of mine have to eat crow, and it's about time that I ate it. So here it is. All right. I already know. First of all, I said I'm just going to get this out of the way before you start. I know I said I had the Rays at the bottom of the division. I've eaten enough crow for that. I'm wrong. Okay, moving on.
So your Eastern teams were the Yankees and the Phillies. Your Central teams were
pick them.
Your Central teams, Cleveland and St. Louis. Yeah. Western teams, Houston, San Diego, with the wild cards being Minnesota, Toronto, and Baltimore. And the National League being the Mets, Braves, and Dodgers, with Toronto and San Diego being in the World Series and Toronto winning it. So,
yikes. Yikes indeed. Okay. So I didn't pick Baltimore did I pick Baltimore to get into the wild card or no? I didn't, did I? I did. Okay.
No, I
was going to say, I thought I had Baltimore sneak in there. All right.
So
anyway, continuing. All right. We'll start with the East like you did as well. East updated standings. I take Baltimore. My East teams are Baltimore and Atlanta. Arguably the two best teams in the league. You can make an argument for Tampa Bay being in that discussion, but it's those two. I don't think we even need to spend more time on that. The Central. I said it before. Cleveland's kind of out of it. They punted this year. It's Minnesota in the AL. In the Central, you said Milwaukee, I believe. No, you said Cincinnati. Okay. I disagree on that. I am taking Chicago. And here's why. One very glaring stat. They are the only team with a positive run differential in the NL Central.
Mhm.
In the NL Central, their run differential is plus 75. We're not talking plus 5. They're up plus 75. The next closest team is Milwaukee at -8. I'm going to ride the hot hand because I have a feeling, you know what? You can't have that much offense and not make it. Even if your pitching is abysmal that day, like there's got to be a way. In the West, I said Houston. I'm going to go with Texas actually, in that situation. And the Dodgers have become the Dodgers again. This is not totally surprising to me, but the Dodgers are the Dodgers again. So I pick them in this situation.
Okay.
For the wild card, in no particular order, like you said, because we won't do that because we'll be here all day. In the AL, I have it's definitely Tampa Bay. It's definitely Houston. I still think in this situation, it's going to be Toronto. You pick the Angels. I love the idea of the Angels. They have done nothing since the trade deadline. They're in that situation right now where we talk about the clubhouse thing, where they went all in. They bought for Ohtani. We love the moves. That team, they aren't together yet at all.
Okay.
They've lost like 6 in a row, I think, right now. It's not good. So they need to turn it around and quickly because right now they're 7 games out of the third wild card spot, and that's not going to be easy to catch, right? In the situation, with all things considered. So again, no particular order. I like Tampa, Houston, and Toronto. Those are the 3 that are actually technically in right now. Again, that's no particular order. I'm just reading them off. In the NL, I think it's going to be a little more difficult. I'm going to change I definitely am changing it. As of right now, the top 3 are Philadelphia, San Francisco, Chicago, tied with Cincinnati. As of right now, obviously I picked Chicago to win the Central, so they're not going to win the wild card. I have it as Philadelphia, San Francisco. I think those 2 have risen above the crop at this point. I think it's going to be Arizona. I think it's those 3. I think it's Philadelphia, San Francisco, Arizona. Mainly because I don't think Cincinnati's ready yet. I think they need to get there. Miami is coming back to earth, which I was waiting for all year, and they finally are starting to now. And San Diego's just too far back to really do it, I think. While they're not out of it, they're only 3 games back of the third wild card, which is kind of scary to think about because that means they're hunting again. They're getting demolished, though, by Los Angeles again today, so that's not helping their cause. So I think Arizona's got to figure their stuff out too, but I think those are the best options for it right now. I also think right now the wild card in the NL is really up to Philadelphia and San Francisco because the other teams in that wild card, all of them are on losing streaks, minus Chicago, who doesn't really count in my opinion on this. They're all on losing streaks of at least 1 game, but most are on a losing streak of more than 3 as of right now. Which is bad. Bad news, Bears. So, yes. Those are my picks at this point.
So, who do you have as your World Series?
Oh, my World Series. I'm sorry. I did have to do that.
Participants and winner.
Okay. World Series participants and winner. My World Series participants are going to be the Tampa Bay Rays. As much as I want to pick Baltimore, I can't do it yet. I so want to pick Baltimore. I so do. I really hope I'm wrong. It's the Tampa Bay Rays.
Are you agreeing with me?
I am agreeing with you. And the Atlanta Braves. Here's what I will say. The NLCS will be between the Braves and the Phillies. In that situation, if the Phillies win a game or 2, win at least 1 at Truist, the Phillies will go back to the World Series. If the Braves hold at Truist, then the Phillies will lose. There is no doubt in my mind. That is the caveat. I think everything else falls in line. I don't believe in the Dodgers wholeheartedly to get all the way through there. I don't believe in anybody else really from the NL. I think it really is technically a 2-team race. And that's not me being facetious because I love the NL East. I've watched enough baseball to know that I think the Dodgers are hot right now, and I think they're frauds. The Central isn't going to produce a winner. I'm sorry. I think they're going to get a division. I think that's it. I love the stories out of the Central. They're just not ready yet. And I think the West isn't ready yet either. So I think it's going to be, exactly what you predicted, sadly. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the Phillies
with Atlanta winning it.
With Atlanta winning it.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, Atlanta versus Tampa? Yeah, Atlanta all day long.
I think it would be a little bit closer than that. Maybe like Atlanta.
The series itself will be going 6 at least.
Yeah.
Because they both are deep in pitching and they're both deep in hitting. It's going to be a battle of who does it. The question then lies in who shows up and who's got the home field advantage.
Yeah.
Which I believe at this point would have to go to the AL because I feel like they're going to have the best division, the best leader out of depending on who it is.
Yeah. But I mean, watch out for Atlanta. So
Atlanta, yeah. God.
But guys, we want to thank you for coming out to our first live stream. You know, for a couple of you who I know for a fact because I got the updates on my phone. If you're still watching, thank you. If not, I don't blame you. But
excellent. We're already telling people not to watch. We love it.
No, please watch us. We're a bunch of weirdos. No, thank you for coming out to the stream. Thanks for watching it. Thanks for eventually going back and watching the videos. Thanks for listening to another edition of What's on Second, a true baseball podcast. It was a great episode, a lot of fun. Kind of a little bit of a testy start there with the brawl, but I think it's going to be a fun stretch down the rest of the way here. So please hit up our socials. Let us know what you think on our takes. I think both of us have honestly a little bit of safe predictions here, but at this point, with the way these teams are playing, it's kind of almost like a writing on the wall situation. So let us know what you think on those social medias, and then we'll see you all next week out there on the diamond.